welcome everyone. I asked in every group session, but wanted to ask you as well, how are you enjoying the conference so far? Yeah, it's been good, huh? And you're so lucky because you get to be in this session, which is probably the best session, right? That's what I think. Just to orient you, you are in room 201, 202 for session Raise Your Recovery. Just a few housekeeping items. If you're looking for the bathrooms, they're just straight out this door and just right out there outside these doors. I was going to say to the right, but they're just right out there. Please take a moment to silence your cell phones or any of your devices. And if you do have to take a call, we just ask that you step outside of the room and be cognizant of the other presenters too outside of their conference sessions too. Since we are hosting hybrid sessions today, we are asking that our presenters repeat your questions so that the audience will be able to hear the question as well as those folks that are online. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Cristine Price, Dr. Cristine Price. Cristine does have a doctorate in natural medicine from Quantum University and a master's degree in psychology. She has practiced integrative mental health and addiction medicine for over 2 decades and authored various self-help tools in nutrition, recovery, and emotional transformation. Cristine certifies practitioners in zero-point meridian technique, an internationally accredited approach to emotional healing that can be learned and practiced by peer support specialists. She is devoted to raising the frequency of mental health and recovery in Utah. Cristine's expertise has been featured on various podcasts and holistic health venues. In 2022, she married Todd Hull, her quantum recovery partner and soulmate. The two of them are currently working at Beacon House, a recovery center in Tooele, Utah, and developing Crown, a product line for nicotine freedom. Please give a warm welcome to Cristine.
I've met more new friends in the last 24 hours than I have in like 2 years, so it's so exciting. Yeah, we live up in Logan, it's like nowhere land. So, okay. My journey, well, I didn't talk about kind of my own recovery journey. I don't think I put that in there. I have 35 years. Wow. Thank you. And some of the things I've learned just here is like, now that makes sense why I was just never a friend with cannabis. One of the most enlightening things I've learned is a correlation with cannabis and psychosis. So I'm also recovering from bipolar disorder and my own little journey through all kinds of fun stuff, right? Anyway, there's a correlation between the two. I did not know this. There's a lot of things coming out with addiction medicine that are so new, and it's really kind of an exciting time, right? But 35 years ago, my drug of choice was cocaine, and when I got off of cocaine, I had a spiritual awakening. And so my first, couple years in college is when I figured out, well, there's something I'm maybe supposed to do now that I know what it means to recover from cocaine addiction. I became a substance abuse counselor. So that was my first career. I don't know if that's on there either. But my first career in substance abuse counseling, I was able to pinpoint a lot of correlations with brain chemistry and addiction and mental health. It's all connected. But back in the 90s, people weren't really talking about that. Now it's like, oh yeah, all these things that I figured out, like people are now reinforcing and saying, oh, there's research on it. But a lot of my journey has been very spiritual and intuitive. And so I've just found things and things have worked and wrote a book about it. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about that. Okay, so we're gonna journey through the frequencies. Oh, your recovery. I wanna hear about your recovery. So one of the first things I'm gonna have you do, oh, I don't want to click this, there we go. We're gonna talk about, this is a course that I developed actually working at Beacon House. I put it all together finally, so this is pretty recent that I've compiled it. There are many different roadmaps to recovery, okay? So mine, I had a massive spiritual awakening, like overnight. I was a different person and I was done and it was solid. Other people, it's been, Todd's a good example, 25 years in and out of treatment, in and out of prison, through everything that didn't work. So different roadmaps, you're gonna look at, here's one that I did work in it was a Box Elder County jail, which was housing prisoners from the state. And so I got to know a lot of these inmates really pretty well. And Joel gave me permission to share his little journey. Look at that, doesn't that look like a wild road? So this is an example as we were, I started this curriculum there years and years ago, and I would have people draw their journey. And so you can kind of see his little roadster, knowing that there's this place up there, the newfound territory, see that newfound land, do not go back. But is that really the only route, right? And then there's the way back, last chance, one day, a Hotel California, party town, warning, and the Niagara Falls, and so I actually developed a lot of these, I guess metaphors working there. And I also found a lot of recovery in codependency. So these little fun little spirals, if you have your handout, you can see, I would just love for you to take a moment and look at what does your recovery journey look like. So when I was reading a book, I believe it was Melody Beatty, Codependent No More, don't we love her? But it must have been one of her earlier editions because I bought a copy of the book and it didn't have this in there anymore. But she showed recovery isn't one size fits all. It could, she said the natural, at the time I read the book, I'm like, it has to look like that straight arrow. I now have to be a straight arrow. I had my spiritual awakening, I better do it right and never look back. And that, I actually tried to do that and had a nervous breakdown. That's when the bipolar started coming out. So there is the spiral, okay, the little spring, which is you go forward and then you come back and then you learn something and you go a little further the next time, right? There's the bipolar wave kind of thing. There's the mess. You see the mess? Anyway, so draw your picture. What do you think? Oh, does everybody, I don't know if people have pens, but think through it if you don't, and imagine what does your journey look like? Is it stair steps? Is it, I'm going to share one in a minute. I'm not going to give it away, so I'm just curious if anybody comes up with it. But I'm going to give you 30 seconds to just kind of sit with that, and I'd love to hear some feedback on it. Okay, I want to hear from a couple people. Anybody want to share? What do you see in your journey? Yeah.
Being a mess for a long time now, I'm on a steadier level.
Oh, the mess that kind of straightens out
Yes.
as it goes. That's awesome. I love it.
Could you repeat?
Oh, so it's basically she saw herself as a mess for a really long time that starts to straighten itself out eventually. Yes. And you got one?
I was gonna say, it kind of depends on which part of the healing process you focus on, I think, a little bit.
Okay, let me pause. So it depends on what part of the healing process you focus on. Okay.
So for me, I was a specific worker, so I was in trapped for a long time. So we focused on the mental health part of it. I felt like I was falling, but then when I escaped, it started going up. But if you think about it now, after I escaped, it looks more like up all the time.
Wow. Okay. So you were trapped. What was it again?
In the FLDS.
FLDS community, and so that was being in a hole probably.
Yeah. So I was falling mentally.
Falling down with your mental health, and then once you got out of that situation, you were able to move.
Yeah.
In a direction that.
And I've been out
beautiful.
for 12 years, and it's
You've been out 12 years.
freedom.
Wow. Good for you. I love freedom stories. I love it. Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna share, and I guess I did give it away because, here's one, a quick little note, and I haven't heard of Ernie Larson mentioned lately, but in the 90s, I heard about him. So Ernie Larson wrote a book called Stage 2 Recovery, Life Beyond Addiction. And it was about 10 years clean that I was trying to figure out what else is there, what I learned in my substance abuse degree didn't, and background didn't explain everything I was going through at the time. So he talks about this. So stage 1 recovery, abstinence, discomfort, switching addictions, people-pleasing, caretaking. So dysfunctional behaviors, workaholic, perfectionist, neurotic, service to others. I was oh, I'm still doing some of that. stuck in the past. And then stage 2 recovery defines as consistency, working a program, focusing on relationships, changing habits, success in multiple life areas, and that's what we're gonna emphasize. Moving through life with more grace and ease, focusing on things that lead to real happiness. So that was a take on, looking at, you can be doing stage 1 and think, is this how it's gonna be forever? And imagine how easy it would be to relapse in that mess, right? And you have comments?
Yeah, mine was like that right here, stage 1 recovery.
Stage 1 wasn't going up or down, it was like solid line, right? And then you had a dip, but now do you see like a way out, like a upward? Awesome, thanks for sharing that. Beautiful. Okay, so yeah, so stage 1 recovery would look like that. It would look kind of like maybe choppy, but not really getting anywhere, it feels like. And so, okay, so here's another one from him. Abstinence and the ability to have a happy life are not the same thing. And so, good to know. But yeah, that gave me some hope that there's more to it than what I found. All right, so this is one of the things that came as an awareness. As I was teaching in the, like I said, in the jail, I had about 12, 15 years clean by then. And I was meeting people that had relapsed after 10 years clean as inmates. And so I knew that whatever it was on this journey for me, I wanted it to help other people as well. Not just for me to figure out this next level, but for these people that I was seeing losing their lives and being, back in the old behavior, how, what were we missing was my question. And so this is one of the things that came as I had some amazing spiritual experiences teaching in that jail. I don't know what, I've heard other people say this, like there's some really big angels because there's some really big demons, right? And so you have this superhero realm that I felt like I was tapping into. And so this is what I found. So the process of recovery, and you'll see this little in the corners, different weeks from the Raise Your Recovery curriculum that this is part of. So this is part of week 2. The process of recovery tends to occur on levels of finding higher and better solutions. The nature of the solutions can be depicted in 4 phases using a recovery trajectory that doesn't move upward, but inward. And that's a whole different, isn't that interesting? Like it changes your brain to even go there. All right, so that's what we get to talk about. And, okay, so the outer layers of the spiral represent those substances and behaviors that are addictive and harmful. The best strategy to use when confronting these is complete abstinence. So you've got your little spiral, right? And if you want to draw on this, you can. The outside, the word didn't quite match up with where it was supposed to be. It may have gotten altered in, what the cyberspace. But it's supposed to just be on the outer ring. Does that make sense? Okay, so abstinence is on the outer ring. And so examples of that, anybody want to jump in? Yeah?
So I just think it's interesting. I thought she copied me, but that I didn't, because I had to turn the other page. But this is my journey.
No way, you did one just like that.
But it's
that's
like
awesome.
has highs and lows in it.
But highs and lows in it.
Yeah,
But that
so
was you saw us in her journey spiral.
So
And you hadn't seen the picture.
No, I go,
That's
you
wild.
copied me, and then I noticed that.
That is a cool story. I love it.
Wow.
That's really cool.
Love it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that's not what I would have drawn for myself, when I first started this. Even 12 years in, I didn't see that.
I try to live more in tune with the spiritual side of myself.
It is, yeah, I think this is a spiritual journey, you'll see, yeah. So the outer layer is the part of the journey that is very destructive, okay? So that is something that you can live without. So there's a lot of things that go into that pile, right? There's, so hard drugs, alcohol is really something we don't need for life sustainment, right? So things that you don't need for life sustainment that you could live without would go in the abstinence, and especially if they're destructive or harmful, right? So, and when you hear about harm reduction, that's one of the things I think we hear is we want people to get away from the really destructive outer layer of that, of those behaviors and potential addictions. And so one that, people don't always think about is like cutting. That became when, as I was working in private practice, for several years, I started to have more and more clients coming and parents coming to me saying, my kids, they're cutting. And I'd never thought of it as an addiction, but as I worked with them, I learned, there's something addictive about it, that's keeping them engaged in that. So that would be one that would go on the outside. So we won't get into all those, but violence, okay. So then we start to go into the next layer, and this is the one where it gets interesting because those are really off. But imagine moderation is in the second loop there. The next layer contains things that are still addictive but play a healthy role in our lives in moderation, such as spending, sex, social media, television. Things that are enjoyable, pleasure center kinds of things. But we can't really live without them. We do have to deal with money and spend it, and social media is kind of a reality, and being able to stay in touch with people and that type of thing. Does that make sense? So can you imagine what what I have people do in these classes is create their own spiral, and then you find what moderation things would go into that for you. And you have room to do that if you'd like to make notes. And sometimes we don't want to put something in the moderation pile because it's like really enjoyable. Todd, do you want to share your most recent? I just think it's fun.
I can't believe you called me out on that. Has anybody ever heard of Candy Crush Saga?
Which one do you
I
play?
love the casinos and everything.
Which one? Which Candy
I don't
Crush?
know, just the one that came up on my phone, I was like, here it is.
Candy Crush
Is
Saga.
it soda? Is it
1,500
soda?
levels later, you guys in a month.
1,500 levels in Candy Crush Saga.
I've been sober for 3 years, going on 3
So
years.
I had to use a spreadsheet to figure out how much money he had spent. I wouldn't go in calculator. It was funny. I laugh because he, my daughter was there when I was adding this up, and she went and she's like, why are you spending all this money? He had to be a good example, so he deleted it. So that's the question, is like, should that go in the moderation or in the abstinence? We don't need it to live, but, and part of this too is, are we addictive, personalities that when we try to put something in moderation, we actually really go right back to our addictive tendencies, right? So it's a learning process to look at that moderation one and test it out maybe and say, all right, can I do this thing in moderation? Just living in moderation is a whole new concept for most addicts, right? Yeah. So but here's what I'm trying to get at. If you look at the space if you're living on the outer ring, okay, destructive behaviors, and then you go into the moderation ring, what's changed? There's less emptiness, okay? And that's what we're gonna get to as we keep going, but just contemplate that. The third layer of the spiral contains things that are harder to be addicted to, but are healthy and positive for us. We strive for attainment of these things. And so these are the things that you hear people say, oh, I wish I could be addicted to the gym. Oh, I wish I could be addicted to work, because the thing is, if they were to just do those things more, their lives would improve, but they really don't want to do them. And in Buddhism, they talk about the two caveats of like our psyche, our basically what we resist and what we crave. Okay, so craving and aversion. Isn't that interesting? So craving is the addictive style of like, I want more and more and more and more of it. Aversion is, oh, don't make me get out of bed before 10 a.m., Or I just don't like vegetables. Don't make me eat vegetables, right? So attainment are the things that we would kind of naturally have an aversion to, but it would be better for us if we would do it. So it's a mind over matter game when we start to get to the attainment, to see if can we keep going into these healthy things, education, self-improvement, and maybe we'll get into an addictive personality with it too. I mean, you hear of big book thumpers, right? The AAers that are so gung-ho that it doesn't totally look balanced. So it's tricky. All right, but this is how and that's where I was at. I was in attainment when I started to explain this. But what I could see is even in attainment, what is still in there? Space, emptiness. There's still some emptiness. Okay, click. don't know where it clicks.
Toward this, for the laptop, is that what you're doing?
It's not clicking.
It's
It
not
wasn't
clicking.
before. Okay, there, no, maybe not. Okay, here we go. So empty space is, even attainment may never be enough. You could, and this is where I was like, and Todd still calls me workaholic, but that workaholism started so long ago that it was, it was like, how can I improve all these areas of my life? And essentially, I was not getting to the core issue, which was the emptiness, the inner emptiness. All right, so as we approach the inner world, it may become more and more uncomfortable. It's even a reason for relapse. And yes, I see nods, because if your aversion is intimacy, you don't want to be with yourself any more than you want anybody else to really be with you, right? And so then there's the sex addictions, and then there's all the other stuff that gets dysfunctional in your life. And, even though it's what everybody else is doing, if this is your journey and you are not complete inside, that could be where you relapse, right? Okay, look at that, black and white and orange recovery. Why not? So, okay, so what I figured out around the same time that I was working in the prison, that's why I use that picture, is that the model of life that I was given as a child was not enough to work with. So this is my journey. I discovered in a 1 week period, it was really weird because it happened all in 1 week. I was handed a book on progression in the last days, I think it was called. It was written by an LDS author, and I was handed a book called Barbara Ann Brennan, who is a intuitive astrophysicist, I believe, that wrote Hands of Light. Okay, so she's like a Reiki master. So very different worlds. Same principles were in there, and they both included 7 levels of progression. And I realized that I had just found something that I was supposed, and I'm still working with today, and it was very meaningful to me. But what I learned from both books is this model of good and evil was not a sufficient model for me to work with. So social obedience was so I would stand there with all these inmates, and we would look at the guards, and we were like, there was this connection we had where we were realizing something was happening. I was receiving these truths, and this powerful knowledge was coming through as I would share this. And it's like we were all on this enlightenment journey together, and we'd look out at the guards and just have an inside joke that we were, this irony that the inmates were getting it and the guards had no clue. And I don't know if anybody, it's not a judgment, but there was something sacred about this journey that I got in touch with. And that it was not the social milieu. It was something that, it was being judged, and it was a life or death decision to step into this journey of addiction and recovery and the battles, the incredible battles that people were fighting. And social obedience did not inspire me. It just didn't. So if you look at it as the bad guys are a 100 frequency, and we're gonna talk a little bit more about this, and the good guys are a 300 frequency, and 200 is kind of this, dependent state of you're not really getting better or worse, you're just kind of riding the wave. The 300 were the people that were the heroes in the social, kind of world. So they were the jailers and the judges and and police officers and the military, and there's a lot of socially functional things at a 300 frequency, and it's really important for society. But it was not what I was striving for. It was not anywhere in my world of what I was about. So that's what I learned, and I learned that there is more. And my question is social obedience the best there is? It's kind of like, how much are you willing to gamble with your life journey? It's really what it's about. So, okay, so I'm gonna talk about these frequency levels. So the 7 levels I talked about, I had actually not learned of Dr. David Hawkins at the time that I got the 7 levels. Later, I discovered these calibrations, and it just made it a lot simpler to name this and identify this. So this pyramid depicts these occurrence of frequencies in humanity. There's many more people at lower frequencies than higher. the pyramid depicts the frequencies proportionately, well, kind of, disproportionately, I should say. Because imagine that at the 700 level, there's 2 people and 100, at the 100 level, 1 million, okay? So if you look at poverty, there's a good 1 million people in poverty for every 2 billionaires. That's one way to look at it, okay? And if you look at this, and we're gonna talk about it in all different kinds of areas, you'll see it's an interesting way to look at life, all right? So at a 100 frequency, you'll see, and you're gonna see a chart. Oh, wait, did I even keep? Is there an extra handout? That's gonna be hard for me. Oh, we got that. Perfect. Did everybody get this? We wanted to, oh, thanks, that'll work. And then here's the grab that too. Oh, did you want this? Did everybody get that wanted to sign up? Okay, perfect, thank you. So, all right, let's follow the handout just for a second.
Thank you.
Okay, so on page 2, it shows you this pyramid map, okay? You can see the physical, psychological, spiritual, occupational, financial, social. So you see the picture of these 5 areas. So something that I thought was interesting is that I actually got to meet Dr. Hawkins. He passed away in his 80s. I think he lived at least 80, almost 90 at least. And he was in Sedona, Arizona, and I always wanted to go see him down there, but I saw him at a Hay House conference in 2005. And he spoke about hope, really, because what he explained is that the average frequency on the planet's been a 200, which is just kind of like that, not really getting anywhere. It's like gray, okay, in black and white model. And he said that he's been tracking this for, like, looking at, he'll muscle test, he uses these different ways of calibrating, but it's interesting how accurate they are. And he would track, I think he said for thousands of years, it hadn't changed until like the last 100 years. And so it was like this hopeful sense of like, oh my gosh, as a whole humanity, we're finally, you look at the recovery model, right? We're finally getting somewhere. And I love that example of like not getting anywhere looking like a flat line. That as a humanity, we're actually getting somewhere. And that was the one biggest thing I took away from it. But he was looking at calibrating things that were very global in nature, and I wanted to bring it down to like the individual experience. And not only did I bring it down to individuals, but I broke up these 5 life areas to see where are we at in each area. So if you look at 5 areas, and then look at your recovery direction, think about mental health, psychological. Has that gone up or down? Financial, that has its own trajectory, right, in your life. And this is an interesting, physical. Most physical health trajectories, if you look at from medical science, you start clear up here and you decline your whole life. That's your health trajectory. Is that the way it has to be? Maybe not. I am in such better shape at 55 than I was at 25, can't even tell you. Okay, so it does not have to go that way. All right, but if you wanted to take a moment and look at this, it's kind of interesting. This gives you some breakdowns to consider. So it might be that you'll find that a 600 frequency is like, this is where you start to transcend certain things, mindsets, even physical health. So you can actually move into 600 frequency physical health patterns and reverse disease. You can actually change the nature of your DNA, not the DNA itself, the expression of the DNA. Okay, so we have some huge potentials. You can kind of see them, and it's kind of fun to kind of look at where you're at, kind of compare your different areas. So you might be in a higher frequency in some and lower in others. Do you see that? How it might work? So socially, it's kind of fun to look at. Becoming really emotionally intelligent, that is one for sure that you can achieve higher over time, in recovery especially. All right, if you want to take an assessment, there's a QR code on here, and it's just kind of fun you'll fill out something kind of like this, and then you get a way to score it, so you can kind of see your frequency level. All right, on to the next thing. So the way that this recovery course works, so it's these different areas in a 12-week process. And you're gonna, we talk about raising physical recovery, emotional recovery, mental recovery, personal, spiritual. So it just kind of covers all the bases. I'll kind of walk you through a few different items from that. So for example, in physical, I had no idea how much my brain chemistry was to blame for my addictions. And there's now DNA testing and different things, but I did realize that I had to do something for my brain chemistry. It wasn't just going to get better on its own. And so I started to find supplements, diets, all kinds of solutions in nutritional health. And that's one of the things I'm gonna give away. Okay, so you ready? Should we do a drawing real quick? We'll do a few. But let's see, I'm just gonna pick randomly. Okay. All right. Is it, I don't know. Something I found is that because the name is in color, I don't always get the names. Jose? Is there a Jose? Yes. Okay, there you go. And it kind of walks you through dopamine, right? And endorphins and serotonin and understand like how all these GABA, who knows about GABA? Have you ever heard of gamma aminobutyric acid? GABA, yeah. So you can actually take a GABA supplement, and if you're in that high stress, kind of like agitated, and you need to rest and go to sleep and calm down, it's super natural. You can just get it right in a health food store typically, or you can find it online. But it's called GABA, and it literally just supports the chemical in your brain that calms you down. And it's the same thing as the chemical in your brain, so it's not a counterfeit. So there's really no, side effects to it. You can wake yourself up from it, it doesn't knock you out. But there's lots of solutions. And 5-HTP is one that supports serotonin. It's a metabolite of serotonin. So there's things like that. I learned a lot about amino acids, and I share a little about it in the course. So there's things that you can do that are high frequency. Now let's think about this. So let's take the idea of you want to relax. Can you see how you could make a decision on all different frequencies to relax, right? From very low frequency, binge on alcohol or something destructive, right? At a little higher frequency, it might be depend on a prescription, but it doesn't really solve the problem. At a little higher frequency, it might be that you have a routine that allows you, like you might quit coffee. And then all of a sudden, your brain kind of works better at night. Okay, at a higher frequency, it might be that you find a productive way of calming your nerves, and it's like meditation, so you're actually developing something that you would normally be like averse, would be in that attainment, right? Now you're learning to become a meditator, and you sleep better at night. Does that make sense? So you can just go to higher and higher frequencies as you go through the journey to solve, to create better solutions. Okay, so I started my master's in psychology in a year, and I hope things are a little different, but as I talk to my daughter who's also getting her master's in social work, I don't know, we hope that they're talking about emotions finally in master's programs. In mine, they wanted nothing to do with the discussion of emotional intelligence. I was in a department that just wanted to have things measurable and pathologized and, disease orientation. And it just was like, we're not gonna talk about emotional intelligence. We don't know what that is and we don't care. So I had to go find it myself. I had to go figure this out myself. And I found it through, actually my favorite author at the time, I was going through a divorce in the 90s, and I found Barbara DeAngelis, and she had an emotional map, so to speak, that took me through more. I got more done with just her workbook. I remember it was $79. That was a lot of money for a single mom who's in grad school, and I got it. And I worked the work. I mean, it was like deep recovery stuff, and workbooks and emotional processing and all these things. And so eventually that became something that I discovered was a little different than her version. but I had this negative emotional well. And I started teaching this to my clients, and I believe over 1,000 clients got my little ebook over years, but it was the thing that every single client needed. And I just thought that was so interesting, every single client. So the Love Self method is what it became called. So this is the negative well, there's also more to it, but there's a positive well and different things. But it allows a processing to happen that doesn't keep, that moves you and clears out the emotional pile. So that's one of those things I like to share with people, and I have different programs and things where I include that. Okay, so there's the scale of consciousness, and what's interesting is, as I had created that well, and then I went and I looked at Dr. Hawkins' scale of consciousness, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's the negative well, look at that. So maybe I won't show you, I'll cover it up. What is the lowest negative emotion? The lowest frequency? It is shame. Did you already know that?
I have a scale I did.
It's kind of common, huh?
I did my own scale, kind of like this.
Oh, you
where it
did?
shows you a frequency scale.
A lot of people find that he calls it the map of consciousness or scale of consciousness, which is interesting, but at a 20 frequency is shame, and they say that the average frequency in a prison is around 50. So think about the emotional state in a prison, right? It's apathy, guilt, and shame, pretty much rotating in grief, loss, right? Then it gets a little better, because it's interesting that the intense emotions like fear, desire, and anger, there's more energy to those, and they can be catalysts, right? And so they're a little higher. And then the switch is going from pride to courage. I thought that was kind of interesting. But neutrality is one of my favorites at a 250. People miss neutrality. Yes, question?
I've seen a scale sort of like this, where it goes from shame, that shame
So to
spiral.
clarify the microphone,
and
you've
then-
seen a scale like this where it goes from shame,
Yes, and in the center, it's survivorship.
in the center survivorship.
So that's like the here and now, and then
Here and now.
creatorship is
And then creatorship.
the
Okay,
moving
yeah.
forward on that.
Yeah, that would be, shame, survivorship, creatorship would kind of fit with that. I would see that. So I do a lot with neutrality, and I think one of the principles that I found is that it doesn't work well to go straight from negative to positive. And I think when we're working with people and we're like, oh, just get a gratitude journal, or just turn it around, or just, it's not necessarily where people are at. And there's so much power in neutrality. Neutrality is you don't have to feel anything for a minute. You don't have to have a decision about life. So I do what's called the neutrality game. We're gonna play the neutrality game. You ready? Okay, so this is something to do when your mind is battling, and sometimes what it will be is, they talk about an addiction, you've got the devil on one shoulder and angel on the other shoulder, right? And really what that is in most of life, you have a negative voice and a positive voice. And you've got something that's trying to get you to spin out and, and whatever thought pattern's gonna make you crazy. Or you've got this other voice that's like, oh no, you know better. And then it just becomes a battle. It just becomes the sea of conflict, right? So to stop that, you play the neutral game. You ready? Okay, here's how the neutral game works. I'm gonna stand where you guys, well, I'm gonna stand from my direction, which is kind of, I had somebody point out that the neutral game looks different. I was playing this actually with Beacon House, because I do it online, and I was telling them what I saw, and immediately, I guess some people were like arguing with my neutral mind because I could only see 11 lights and there was 15. and the director there was there, and she's like, isn't that interesting that you decided to go into negative instead of just see what you could see? And so that's an interesting point. So I'm gonna see from my side, I see 4 windows. I see 2 doors. There are empty chairs. And you have to be careful not to use adjectives that create emotion. I see women and men. And so you can go with all your senses. My feet are touching gravity. I can hear the fan come on. You with me? Well, this one's trailing. It's just interesting because it's like, It's basically mindfulness, right? It's that you're engaging with your senses, but you're doing it with no judgment and attempting to like keep emotion out of it for the most part, right? Just, it is. And if that's what your mind's working on, it can't work on the battle, right? It just is here and now. So it's called the neutral game. All right. So I like neutrality. And then you can keep going up the scale. You've got, positives, all the way up to love and enlightenment. So on Dr. Hawkins' scale, he identifies it as 600 is enlightenment. I think he's on the verge of enlightenment. And 200 is an average, is what he's calling it. So you can see that red line. And so neutrality is right around there. With anything below that is negative in our terms, typically. Okay, so yeah, so you can kind of see like they just kind of side by side there. So we're gonna do something fun. Okay, this comes from my technique, and it's in the emotional recovery, the 0-point meridian technique. So I learned emotional freedom technique in 2003 with Gary Craig, who was kind of he was the founder really of EFT. Who's heard of EFT in here? Just a couple, okay. So the tapping technique was not popular until it just kind of exploded over time to where now you can just look online, there's tons of YouTube videos and all kinds of things, and has been for at least probably 10 years. So the experience I had with it though is that I knew it worked and I couldn't find a lot of validation at the time. There's more and more now. I've got people that are working on even doing some research and getting published. So, but over time I developed a version of it called the 0-point meridian technique. So we're gonna do it real quick. You wanna try it? Okay, it's a quick way to shift out of negative emotion. So let's take that really negative emotion. So remember back on that chart. Can everybody in here relate to something that that you could experience, say some fear about, a stressor? Something that's like, gets ya. Say, yes, there's something back. Fear of abandonment, that's a good one. Okay, so that's one. And a lot of people will fear scarcity. So let's say scarcity, because scarcity could relate to people are leaving, or money is leaving, or, I don't know if my job is secure, right? Can everybody relate to scarcity on some level? Okay, we don't relate to scarcity. Okay, so pick your scarcity trigger, and then what you're gonna do is rate it on a 1 to 10. Did I get that on there? Okay. On a 1 to 10, show me by fingers, like how intense you feel like it is, with a 10 being like panic, and a 1, like it's neutral. It's done, it's gone. Okay, so we have, okay, awesome. 7s and 8s and lots of 7s and 8s. All right, perfect. So now you're gonna take, this is a little tricky with my, okay, we can do this. Okay, so you're gonna take this hand, you're gonna tap here on what's called the small intestine meridian. Interesting story is that this meridian, it starts at your shoulder blade and it winds its way down off your pinky. And I learned about this meridian when my daughter had a pinky issue. She actually had a pinky growth. And I went to a medical intuitive, actually it was a seminar where I was doing the tapping and I was a medical intuitive there. I stood in front of her, told her the story about my daughter, her pinky, and she tapped me on the shoulder and said, does she have shoulder issues? And I know that about her, like she actually did have really sensitive, like tight shoulders. And it's just her small intestine meridian, isn't that interesting? So it's a real thing. So we tap right there and you're gonna make this statement. So even though I have this scarcity fear, this scarcity about, and you can fill in the blank, I love and accept myself completely. With infinite love and gratitude, I release and forgive. Now you're gonna hold, that's the meridian, you're gonna hold it, breathe in. And then let it go. And sometimes you'll even wanna push air out if you can. So the goal is to get all the air out. And we're gonna do it a couple more times. Okay, so even though I have this scarcity issue and this fear, I love and accept myself completely. With infinite love and gratitude, I release and forgive. Deep breath in. Sorry, you should keep tapping while you're breathing in, and then hold it as you exhale. Now this is part of it, is the 0 is the exhale. The 0 is to see if all the energy can be out. Stay in that exhale as long as you can. So we'll do it a third time. And this time, oh, and I saw Jan, so that's like you shifted into your parasympathetic. So when you're in fight flight, you go in your gas pedal, right? When you relax, you go into your brake pedal and your body can heal. Okay, that's a good sign. Okay, even though I have this scarcity issue and this fear, bring it all up, feel it, breathe in. Oh, sorry. We'll just let it go. Now let go. I love and accept myself completely. With infinite love and gratitude, I release and forgive. And it's interesting because if you can find that silence, kind of like the neutral game. Can anybody see a silence there that wasn't there before? A quiet? It's interesting. There's power in that. There's so much power in the 0. So I started looking for the 0 about the time I'd learned this, I started developing it, and I knew there was something to the 0. And it inspired me to go to Quantum University because I was so intrigued by 0-point fields. I knew there was something to them. I tell the story about my grandfather was on his deathbed when I was in high school, and he asked my mom for a book on quantum physics. Because he started going in and out the veil, like in and out through the heavens. And he started to learn things and he'd come back in and come back out. And he's like, I got it, I figured it out. I just need a book on quantum physics. and what he was learning, what he was figuring out had to do with finer matter. He would talk about that. He was a really brilliant man. He would talk about finer matter and that there's so much there in that quantum field. And so as I went through Quantum University, and I'll just share this and then I'm gonna have you re-rate yourself, but I discovered a man named Nassim Haramein. So Nassim Haramein is a physicist, quantum physicist, who discovered the math of a quark. So a quark is the smallest itty bit of information, okay, in the quantum field. And he tasked himself, or someone tasked him with figuring out how much information is in that quark. And he had to use the math of a black hole to find out how much information was in a quark. And it turns out the information, the space, the massiveness of a black hole and the information of a quark parallel. Basically, there's as much information in a quark as exists in the entire universe. It's mind-blowing. And that's what the quantum world is nothing is everything. So, okay, so once you find that 0, anything's possible. Healing's possible. Change is possible. Transformation's possible. Okay, now, I'm just curious, show me what your numbers are now, that we did that 3 times. I have this concept. It went down. 3 points, 2 points, 2 points, went down more than 2 points, yeah? Cool, okay, so everybody went down some. So there's a whole process, it's like a good 30-minute session usually to use the whole 0-point meridian process, but you get a feel for it, it's powerful. And I've done some research on it, and it was on the back of this here, if anybody wants to know more about it, there's a little bit on that as well. Okay, so you can take a frequency assessment if you're interested, it's kind of fun. You get your numbers, I mentioned that a minute ago. This is another fun one. I love talking about Johari's window, and it's the idea that 70% of our brain power is devoted to the subconscious mind, the closed mystery. See if I can reach all the way. So I realized that in the study of 0 and in the study of quantum beings that we are potential quantum beings, right? I mean, that's really what we are. And we don't even know what we don't know, right? So if you take a pencil, imagine a pencil up here, and if you only live from what you know and what others know about you, and that's how you operate in the world. Like just face value, just what's comfortable to share. Do you trust people that live from that corner only? Do you feel like you can open up to them? Probably, you know, that just live in that first little corner of the open mind? I don't know. When I went into recovery, this was my journey. As I started to move down, and the blind window is where what others know, if you're open to feedback, you don't know everything. Sometimes people know things about you that you don't know about yourself, right? And if you're open to feedback, going to therapy or work with a sponsor or someone who's got a seasoning of life that they could say, oh yeah, you're probably doing this or dealing with that. That opens up the blind window. And if you share your secrets, you see how that opens up a whole nother section. So if you take that pencil that I talked about kind of up in the corner and you slide it down and you go into your blind window and you go into your secret window and you open those up, those become open windows, what happens eventually? The closed mystery window starts to open up. And that was where everything got really interesting in my life. Because when there's this section of your subconscious that others don't know and you don't know, but your recovery journey takes you into this, it could be the Pandora's box, but it could also be your superpowers, right? It could be your true purpose that starts to get uncovered, that nobody knew and you didn't know, but all of a sudden your recovery takes you into an unknown realm, right? Okay, so there's the full kind of 700, where I've got intuition, discernment, enlightenment at that 600, spiritual alignment, oneness with God. And it's an interesting topic. Now I'm going to ask you a question. This is an interesting question. So if you look at 600 as like, these are like masters of spiritual things. Okay, Todd had a session with a Reiki master the other day who was able to identify things that were totally in that mystery window, right? And open, I mean, it was just like mind-blowing, right? And so there's people that operate from that level and can open up truth and and information and healing. So I'm gonna ask this question. Do you think it's easier to get it to a 600 from a 300 or a 100? Why do you say 100?
Because I mean, at least for me, I would say that it's easier to go from kind of more of that scarcity to that enlightenment. There's not so much like barrier that's holding me.
Okay, it's easier to go from scarcity to enlightenment because you don't have a barrier that's holding you.
Like,
Okay.
right, you get, for me, like if I'm in the middle, it's like that comfort, right?
The 300 is comfort.
Yeah.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So if you take a person, and I'm gonna go back to the judicial system, the people working in the jail that were, the heroes. And there are some amazing heroes, firemen and policemen, like thank goodness for those heroes in the world. But are those heroes going to set everything aside for a spiritual journey?
No.
Maybe not, right? And is it life or death if they don't? They're saving the people, underneath, but when someone at a 100 who has faced like the end of their life through whether that was because they could have gone to jail for life, because they could have overdosed, because they could have gotten killed in that gunfight, whatever, if that person surrenders their life to a higher purpose, they can go anywhere.
So I think that, if you're talking about like people in prison, inmates and stuff like that, I think that there's a big difference because when you hit a prison, you're at your lowest point
Yes.
in life. So you're forced to really dig deep and try to find purpose and meaning, and you're really just searching for anything that's gonna bring you out of there and give you purpose.
Yes.
So you want to find yourself, and a person in authority like a CO is working, I think, like Stephen Hawkins says, more like on that 200 because they're day-to-day, like, paycheck, like, you know what I mean? It's just the routine. So they're just.
So let me summarize you, yeah. So what you're saying is someone who's an inmate in that situation of like they're hitting bottom, they're forced to have to look at change, like massive change. And someone who's just paycheck to paycheck or just, you know, operating in a social system of, you know, like this is what you do every day is, yeah, they're not in that like life or death thinking, right? Yes, exactly. Okay. So, the spiritual journey has its own pace. And it may never touch religion, it may include religion, and that's something that I'm about is I don't have a strong position on religion, but I'm definitely supportive of it when it works with the journey. So, okay, as you recall, attainment may never be enough. So what is the answer to what is at or not at the center? Okay, centering is what allows us to open up and fill the inner emptiness. And part of that is knowing who you are and why you're here, right? And it could be the journey of a lifetime. Many ever find it. I don't know what that video was. Anyway, oh, that's a fun one that's Barbara DeAngelis I mentioned. And she talks about the journey of the lifetime. I'll skip through that. But this is the year I actually have a name for what it is I do. The Love Solve Academy. So it is basically a frequency journey. It's a school, so to speak, of learning these principles, and I do offer certifications and different things. And I'm about the people that are on the journey being the ones who are offering the solutions. And so I mostly work with people that are not clinical, okay? So there's more details on the program. And then what I'd like to see is people having enough training in this that they could teach it and use it in places that it's time sometimes for a different approach, right? So what I found in a lot of the rehabs we've been working in is CBT and DBT and all that kind of stuff is great, but if it's just being recycled and people aren't really having a shift, let's create a shift, right? Yeah.
Let's create a
Let's create a
shift.
shift.
A
Let's
big
do it.
one.
All right.
Big shift.
Frequency shift, what it's all about. Thank you.